A man believed he had saved a helpless puppy. Without hesitation, he scooped it into his hands, certain he had just saved a fragile puppy from certain death. But when he rushed to the vet for a routine checkup, everything changed. The doctor's smile faded, her hands trembled, and her face turned pale. What she saw was not what anyone expected, and her words sent chills through the room. This wasn't just a puppy. It was something far more mysterious, something no one was prepared to handle. What started as an act of kindness would soon unravel into a shocking, unforgettable revelation. Stay tuned. This story will leave you shocked. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The late afternoon sun was sinking, casting long shadows across the quiet country road. The man, weary from a long day, drove slowly, his window slightly rolled down to let in the cool evening breeze. It was supposed to be an ordinary ride home. But then, out of nowhere, a faint sound pierced through the stillness, a weak, high-pitched cry, almost too soft to notice. He frowned, slowing his car as the sound reached his ears again. Curiosity tugged at him. He pulled over to the side of the road, cut the engine, and listened. For a moment, there was silence, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. And then there it was again, a desperate whimper, muffled but unmistakable. He followed the sound, his shoes crunching against the gravel, until he reached the edge of a ditch hidden by tall weeds. Pushing the grass aside, his eyes widened. Curled in the shadows was the tiniest creature he had ever seen. Barely bigger than the palm of his hand, it trembled, its jet-black fur blending almost seamlessly with the dark soil. Two enormous eyes stared up at him, wet, glassy, and filled with fear. They looked too large for its tiny face, shining like polished marbles in the fading light. The man's heart clenched. "Oh my God." "A puppy," he whispered, kneeling down. The little thing's thin body shook with every cry, its fragile legs barely moving as it tried to push itself closer. Instinctively, he reached out his hand, and to his surprise, the creature didn't pull away. Instead, it pressed its trembling body against his palm as though it had been waiting for someone, anyone, to come. A rush of emotion flooded him. The thought of leaving it there, alone and defenseless, was unbearable. Carefully, he scooped it up, feeling just how light it was, like holding a fragile bird. Its tiny heartbeat thudded frantically against his fingers. The creature blinked at him, wide-eyed, and for the briefest moment, the world around him seemed to stop. As he held it closer, the man noticed details that puzzled him. The ears were unusually sharp and large for such a small puppy, and the sound of its cries wasn't quite like the yelp of a dog. But he pushed those thoughts aside. Whatever it was, it needed saving, and in that moment nothing else mattered. He wrapped the tiny body in his handkerchief and cradled it against his chest. "Don't worry, little one," he murmured softly. "You're safe now." The cries quieted, replaced by a faint shiver that made him hold it even tighter. Standing at the roadside, the man looked back at the ditch one last time. The shadows had grown deeper and the air carried a chill. He knew if he hadn't stopped, this little creature wouldn't have survived the night. Fate, it seemed, had placed him there at exactly the right moment. With the fragile life nestled in his hands, he walked back to his car, unaware that what he believed to be an act of rescue was only the beginning of a mystery far more shocking than he could ever imagine. The man gently placed the fragile bundle on the passenger seat, his hands still trembling from the discovery. The little creature whimpered softly, its tiny chest rising and falling so quickly that he feared it might stop breathing at any second. He adjusted the handkerchief around it, trying to create a makeshift cocoon of warmth. For a moment, he simply stared at it, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility he had just taken on. The headlights illuminated the road ahead as he started the engine, but his mind was still caught on those enormous eyes. They had locked onto his in a way that felt different, almost human, as if pleading not just for rescue but for love. The sound of its soft cries filled the car, fragile but persistent, each one tightening the knot in his chest. He spoke without realizing it, his voice gentle. "It's all right, little one. I've got you now. You're safe." As the car rolled forward, he glanced at the creature again, noticing details he hadn't before. Its paws were unbelievably small, with tiny claws that didn't quite resemble those of the puppies he had seen growing up. Its ears twitched at every sound, too sharp, too pointed. Yet in the glow of the dashboard lights, all he could see was vulnerability, pure, innocent, and desperately in need of care. The man's imagination began to run wild. He pictured the creature growing strong under his care, running across fields playing fetch, wagging its tail as he called its name. He hadn't even named it yet, but the bond was already forming in his heart. Maybe this is fate, he thought. Maybe I was meant to find you. Reaching for the radio, he quickly turned it off. The moment felt too sacred for background noise. Instead, he listened to the soft rhythm of its tiny breaths, the way its body shifted slightly each time the car jolted over a bump. Every sound reminded him of just how fragile life could be. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, determination flickering in his eyes. Whatever this little soul was, it had been abandoned to die, and he would not let that happen. He promised himself out loud this time that he would protect it no matter the cost. I won't let anything happen to you. Not ever. Unaware of the storm that lay ahead, the man drove through the fading twilight, carrying not just a small life in his car, but the beginning of a story that would soon shake him to his very core. The road stretched out before him, winding through open fields bathed in the fading light of dusk. The hum of the engine filled the silence, steady and low, yet his thoughts raced faster than the car itself. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked to the passenger seat where the tiny creature rested, wrapped snugly in the handkerchief. It hadn't made a sound since they left the ditch, but its wide, unblinking eyes followed him, as though trying to understand who this stranger was. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. You're one lucky little thing, you know that? His voice broke the stillness, soft but full of warmth. If I hadn't stopped, I don't even want to think about it. The thought made his chest tighten. He pressed the gas pedal just a little harder, eager to get home where it would be safe. Glancing again at the tiny form, he noticed how it shifted slightly, curling deeper into the cloth. Its ears twitched, and for a moment he wondered if it actually understood his words. The idea made him chuckle, though unease lingered beneath the sound. Maybe I should call you Shadow, he murmured. You're as dark as the night itself. The name seemed to fit, though he wasn't sure why. His mind wandered as the miles passed. He imagined introducing the puppy to his friends, watching it grow, training it, maybe even giving it a small bed near the fireplace. The thought filled him with unexpected joy, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. It was strange how such a tiny creature could already make him feel less alone. Yet in between those comforting thoughts, small doubts crept in. He replayed the moment he first saw it, those oversized eyes, those sharp little ears. Something about it didn't add up, but each time his mind tried to chase the thought, he silenced it. Don't overthink. It's just a puppy. That's all. The road narrowed as he neared the outskirts of town. Streetlights began to flicker on, casting long pools of yellow light across the pavement. The creature let out the faintest sigh, its body rising and falling in steady rhythm. For now at least it was calm. The man exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. He had no idea that this quiet ride home was leading him into the heart of a mystery far greater than he ever imagined. The front door creaked open as the man stepped inside, carefully cradling the small creature against his chest. His house was quiet, the faint tick of the wall clock the only sound that greeted him. He set down his keys on the counter, then glanced at the bundle in his arms. Two glistening eyes stared back at him, unblinking, as though studying its new surroundings. Welcome home, he whispered, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He carried it into the living room and gently placed it on the couch, arranging a soft blanket around its trembling body. The creature curled into the fabric, letting out a sound that resembled both a whimper and a sigh. For the first time that evening, it seemed almost content. The man hurried to the kitchen, pulling out a bowl and filling it with warm milk. He placed it on the floor, coaxing the little one closer. At first it hesitated, sniffing the air with its sharp nose. Then, with surprising eagerness, it dipped its tiny mouth into the bowl, lapping noisily. Relief washed over him. Good, he said softly. You must have been starving. He knelt beside it, watching closely. Something about the way it drank seemed different, not quite like a puppy, yet not like any animal he had ever seen. Its movements were oddly precise, its small paws gripping the edge of the bowl with an intensity that felt unnatural. He brushed the thought aside, convincing himself it was just the fragility of youth. Later, he set up a small cardboard box near the fireplace, lining it with towels for warmth. Lifting the creature gently, he placed it inside, watching as it curled into a tight ball. Its large ears twitched with every crackle of the fire, but it didn't cry anymore. For a moment, the man simply sat there, mesmerized. The flickering light danced across its glossy black fur, giving it an almost otherworldly glow. He reached out and stroked its tiny back. The creature stiffened, then slowly relaxed under his touch. "You're safe now," he whispered again, as though repeating it would make it more real. He felt something stir inside him, a bond forming, fragile yet powerful, as though fate had tied their paths together. That night, as he prepared for bed, he couldn't resist checking on it one last time. The creature lay motionless in the box, its eyes half closed but still glinting faintly in the firelight. Its small chest rose and fell in steady rhythm, yet there was something about the way it stared back at him, even half asleep, that sent a shiver crawling down his spine. The man stood there for a long moment, torn between comfort and unease. He told himself it was only exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. Tomorrow, he would take it to the vet, just to be sure everything was fine. With that thought, he turned off the lights, unaware that this first night at home would be the beginning of a truth he was not prepared to face. The man awoke to the faintest of sounds, a scratching noise, light but persistent, drifting from the living room. For a moment he lay still, convincing himself it was just the fire settling in the hearth. But then it came again, sharper this time. Heart thumping, he slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway. The box by the fireplace was empty. His stomach tightened. The blanket lay crumpled, the towels pushed aside as though something had crawled its way out. He scanned the room until his eyes caught movement in the corner. The little creature was there, standing on its wobbly legs, staring up at the window. The man sighed in relief. "Shadow, you scared me." He moved closer but froze halfway. The tiny body stood unnaturally still, its head tilted at an odd angle, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the moonlight. It wasn't the gaze of a playful puppy. It was something sharper, more observant, almost calculating. He crouched down slowly. The creature blinked once, then let out a sound he hadn't heard before, a churring noise halfway between a hiss and a whimper. It sent a ripple of unease down his spine. "You're different, aren't you?" he whispered. But as quickly as the sound came, the creature stumbled forward, collapsing into his hands with a pitiful whine, as though begging for comfort again. Confused, he carried it back to the box and tucked it in, though sleep was the last thing on his mind now. Lying awake in his bed, he replayed the scene again and again. The sharpness in its eyes, the strange noise, the way it had been drawn to the window, standing as if it was waiting for something or someone out there. The next morning, the oddities continued. When he tried to feed it more milk, it sniffed the bowl but turned away. Instead, it gnawed at the wooden edge of the box, tiny teeth scraping with surprising force. Later, when he reached out to stroke its fur, he felt a shudder pass through its body. Not from fear, but from something else. Something he couldn't quite name. His neighbors came by to visit that afternoon. "So you rescued a puppy?" one of them asked, leaning over to peek inside the box. The man hesitated before nodding. The neighbor studied it for a moment, then frowned. "That doesn't look like any puppy I've seen." The man laughed nervously, brushing off the comment. But deep down, doubt gnawed at him. He had saved this creature's life, yet every passing hour left him more certain of one thing. This was no ordinary puppy. Days passed, and the little creature became the center of the man's world. Despite the unease he felt at times, he couldn't deny the growing connection. Every morning he would wake to find it waiting for him, its round eyes gleaming, its tiny body trembling with anticipation. The sound of its cries had softened, less desperate now, almost as if it trusted that he would always be there. He decided to name it Shadow, a name that fit the dark sheen of its fur and the way it seemed to follow him from room to room. Wherever he went, whether to the kitchen, the porch, or the living room, Shadow was never far behind, its little paws clicking softly on the floor. The man often chuckled. "You really are my shadow, aren't you?" In the evenings, when he sat by the fireplace with a book or the television murmuring in the background, Shadow would curl up in his lap, tucking its head under his hand. Its warmth against his chest brought a comfort he hadn't felt in years. He found himself talking to it more and more, sharing little details about his day, confiding in it as though it could understand. And sometimes, when those wide eyes stared back at him, he wondered if maybe it did. But even as the bond grew stronger, peculiarities remained. Shadow's cries weren't barks. They were closer to chirps or high-pitched whines that echoed strangely in the quiet house. Its ears twitched constantly, always alert, as though it could hear sounds far beyond human perception. At times, the man caught it staring into the corners of the room, watching empty spaces as though something invisible lingered there. Still, his affection only deepened. He bought toys, though Shadow rarely played with them, preferring instead to curl near his feet or gnaw on objects it shouldn't. Chair legs, wooden boxes, even the edge of the table. "You're a strange one," he often muttered with a fond smile, "but you're mine." Neighbors continued to ask questions. Some joked about how unusual the puppy looked, others raised eyebrows, but the man shrugged it all off. He didn't care what anyone thought. Shadow had been abandoned and helpless when he found it, and now it had a home. That bond, forged in that roadside ditch, was something he refused to break. One night, as he lay on the couch half asleep, Shadow crept up and rested its head on his chest. Its large eyes blinked slowly, unblinking in their devotion before closing at last. The man felt an unexpected lump in his throat. For all the oddities, for all the unanswered questions, this fragile little life had chosen him. And in that quiet moment he realized he could never let it go. Whatever Shadow truly was, it was his now, and he would protect it with everything he had. The days slipped by, and Shadow became woven into the man's daily routine. Yet the more time he spent with it, the more questions gnawed at him. Its behavior didn't match the puppies he had raised as a boy. It hardly barked, instead making those strange, high-pitched chirps. Its teeth grew quickly, sharper than he expected, and its eyes, those enormous glinting eyes, never seemed to lose their eerie intensity. He tried to dismiss the doubts at first. Maybe it's just a rare breed, he told himself, stroking the creature's back as it dozed in his lap. But the unease wouldn't leave. At night, when the house was silent, he sometimes caught Shadow pacing restlessly, as if unsettled by things he couldn't see. Other times he woke to find it staring at him in the darkness, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. One morning, as he poured milk into Shadow's bowl, he noticed the creature turn away again, uninterested. Instead, it gnawed at the wooden leg of the table, splintering it with surprising strength for its small size. The sound made his skin crawl. Something was off, terribly off. The man leaned back in his chair, staring at Shadow as it crouched in the corner. For the first time since the day he had found it, fear edged into his heart. What if his neighbors were right? What if this wasn't a puppy at all? The thought made his stomach twist. He couldn't ignore the truth anymore. If he wanted answers, real answers, he needed to take Shadow to a professional. A vet would know. A vet could tell him what he was really dealing with. That evening, as Shadow curled into his lap once more, the man ran a hand through its dark fur and made his decision. "Tomorrow," he whispered, his voice low but steady. "Tomorrow we're going to the vet. We'll figure out what you are." Shadow's ears twitched at the words, and for a fleeting moment the man swore it understood. Those wide eyes blinked slowly, never leaving his face. The air grew heavy. The fire crackled in the silence, and an uneasy thought flickered through his mind. What if he wasn't ready for the answer? The next morning, the man tucked Shadow carefully into a small carrier, lining it with the same handkerchief he had used the night he found it. The creature whimpered softly at first, but soon grew quiet, its enormous eyes peering through the mesh as if aware something unusual was about to happen. The man's chest tightened. He stroked the side of the carrier gently. "Don't worry, little one. It's just a checkup." The veterinary clinic was a modest building on the edge of town, its walls lined with posters of smiling dogs and playful kittens. The man stepped inside, greeted by the faint smell of antiseptic and the soft murmur of animals in the waiting room. A receptionist looked up with a polite smile. "Appointment? No. It's urgent," the man replied, his voice tight. "I found a puppy a few days ago. I think something's not right." The receptionist nodded and gestured toward the seats. The man sat down, the carrier balanced on his lap. Shadow remained unnervingly still inside, its eyes locked on him. Other pet owners in the waiting room leaned forward to peek inside. One woman tilted her head. "What a strange-looking pup," she said. Her voice was kind, but curiosity laced every word. Before he could respond, a door opened, and a veterinarian in a white coat stepped into the room. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, but her expression grew serious the moment her gaze fell on the carrier. "Let's take a look," she said, motioning for him to follow. In the exam room, the man set the carrier on the metal table and unzipped it slowly. Shadow crawled out with deliberate, almost cautious movements, its sharp ears twitching at every sound. The vet froze, her brows knitting together as she studied the creature. "This is what you found?" she asked carefully, her tone void of the casual reassurance he had expected. "Yes," the man said quickly. "I thought it was a puppy, but it's been different. It doesn't eat properly, it makes strange noises," and he hesitated, searching her face. "You don't think it's a dog?" The vet didn't answer right away. Instead, she crouched to eye level with Shadow, observing every detail. Shadow met her stare unflinchingly, its round eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Finally, the vet straightened, her expression unreadable. "I'll need to run some tests," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. Then she looked at the man, her voice firmer now. "This isn't going to be a routine visit. Please wait here." The man's stomach twisted. He had expected surprise, maybe concern, but not this heavy silence, not this careful choice of words. As the vet left the room, Shadow pressed itself against his hand, letting out a soft, strange noise that echoed in the sterile air. For the first time, the man wondered if he was about to learn something he truly wasn't prepared to hear. The exam room felt colder now, the hum of the overhead light buzzing faintly above them. The man sat on the edge of his chair, his hands gripping his knees as the vet returned with gloves, a stethoscope, and a tray of instruments. Shadow sat on the table, unnervingly calm, its wide eyes following her every movement. "All right," the vet murmured, almost to herself. "Let's take a closer look." She reached out slowly, allowing Shadow to sniff her gloved hand. Instead of cowering or growling, the creature tilted its head, studying her with an intensity that made the man's stomach tighten. She began with the basics, lifting its tiny paws one by one. Her brow furrowed. "The pads, they're rougher than a puppy's should be," she muttered. "Almost like it's been walking long distances, but the size suggests it's barely weeks old." The man leaned forward. "Is that bad?" "Not bad," she replied carefully, "but unusual." She gently opened Shadow's mouth next, peering at its teeth. A sharp inhale escaped her lips. "These aren't deciduous teeth, these are—" "Fully formed," the man frowned. "Fully formed, but it's just a baby." "That's the problem," she whispered, scribbling notes. "Puppies don't develop teeth like this at this stage. They're sharper, more pronounced, almost predatory." Shadow let out a small sound, somewhere between a chirp and a growl, making the man flinch. The vet froze, listening. "That is not a bark." Next, she examined its ears, gently running her fingers along the edges. The creature twitched but didn't resist. "The ears are too developed for a domestic breed," she said, her voice low. "More triangular, sharper, like a wild animal's." The man swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. "So, what are you saying? That it's not a dog?" The vet didn't answer right away. She lifted her stethoscope, placing it gently against Shadow's tiny chest. Her expression shifted again, confusion mixed with unease. "The heartbeat. It's faster than normal. Not irregular, but elevated. This is not the rhythm of a puppy." The man's fingers dug into his knees. "But it looks like a puppy, doesn't it?" His voice cracked with desperation. The vet removed the stethoscope and met his eyes, her expression grave. "It looks like something trying to be a puppy," she said slowly. The words hit him like a stone. He stared at Shadow, who blinked up at him with those enormous, unblinking eyes, as if mocking the uncertainty swirling in the room. The vet continued, palpating the creature's sides with practiced hands. Suddenly, Shadow let out a sharp hiss-like sound, twisting away with surprising strength. The man jumped from his seat, but the vet raised a hand. "It's all right. It's defensive, but it's strong. Much stronger than its size should allow." She jotted down more notes, her hand trembling slightly. "This isn't domestic. At least not entirely. I need to run further tests. Blood work, maybe an X-ray. There are anomalies here I can't explain." The man felt his throat tighten, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Anomalies?" "Yes." She removed her gloves slowly, setting them aside. "Whatever this is, it's not behaving or developing like any puppy I've ever seen." The silence in the room deepened, broken only by the soft scratch of Shadow's claws against the metal table. The man's chest ached with a mix of fear and denial. He had rescued this creature, nurtured it, loved it. How could it be anything else? But the vet's face told him the truth he wasn't ready to hear. Something was very, very wrong. The man sat frozen, the sterile smell of the exam room pressing heavy on his senses. His heart thudded in his chest, each beat louder than the last. Shadow sat calmly on the metal table, unbothered by the tension that crackled in the air. Its wide, gleaming eyes shifted between him and the vet, almost as though it knew exactly what was happening. The vet removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose before looking at him again. Her voice was steady, but beneath it was an edge of disbelief. "Listen carefully," she said. "What you found, it isn't a puppy, at least not in the way you think." The man blinked, his throat dry. "What do you mean?" "Of course it's a puppy. Look at it. Small, helpless, it cries like one." "I've been feeding it, caring for it." She shook her head firmly. "No, that's the point. It mimics a puppy. It's meant to look fragile, meant to trick the eye. But biologically, it doesn't add up. Its teeth are too sharp, too developed for its age. Its heart rate is elevated beyond normal canine patterns. And its behavior." She trailed off, glancing at Shadow, who now tilted its head as if listening. "It's not canine." "Not entirely." The man felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Then what is it?" The vet hesitated, her fingers tightening around her clipboard. "I think you've rescued a wild hybrid. Not a domestic puppy, but something closer to the wild, possibly a young wolf cub. Maybe even a crossbreed. That would explain the sharp ears, the odd vocalizations, the strength beyond its size." The word struck him like a blow. A wolf? His mind scrambled back to the ditch, to the fragile creature curled in the shadows. It had looked so defenseless, so desperate. Could it really belong to something so dangerous? But the vet wasn't finished. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "And there's more. I ran a quick preliminary check on its vitals. Its bone density, its muscular structure. They're advanced. Too advanced. It's not just a wolf cub, it's developing unnaturally fast." His stomach twisted. "Unnaturally? What are you saying?" "I don't know yet," she admitted, her face grave. "But I've never seen anything like this before. It shouldn't be possible." She glanced again at Shadow, who blinked slowly, those enormous eyes glinting under the harsh light. "It's almost as though it's evolving in front of us." The man stumbled back a step, his breath shaky. His mind fought to reject every word, clinging to the memory of that tiny, trembling body in the ditch. "No," he whispered. "I saved it. It's just a puppy. It needed me." Shadow let out a low, churring noise, not a bark, not a whimper, something stranger. The sound sent chills up his spine. For the first time, he felt as though the creature wasn't just making noise. It was communicating. The vet's expression hardened. "Listen to me. If it's truly wild, wolf or otherwise, you need to understand the risk. When it grows, it won't behave like a pet. It will follow instincts you can't control. This could be dangerous." But the man shook his head stubbornly, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't care. It was abandoned, left to die. I can't turn my back on it now. Whatever it is, it's mine. I'll protect it." The vet sighed heavily, pity in her eyes. "I understand the bond. But bonds don't erase biology. If I'm right, this creature is something rare, something not meant for domestication. You need to be careful." Her warning echoed in his ears, but his gaze remained locked on Shadow. The little creature stared back at him with that same piercing intensity, as though it knew the secret the vet had just revealed and was daring him to accept it. In that moment, torn between fear and loyalty, the man made an unspoken vow. He didn't care what the vet said. Wolf cub or not, abnormal or not, Shadow had chosen him, and no revelation, however shocking, could break that bond. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, a seed that would soon grow into something far more terrifying than he ever imagined. The ride home from the vet was the longest of his life. The world outside the windshield blurred into streaks of gray, but all he could see was Shadow curled in the carrier beside him. Its enormous eyes glowed faintly under the dashboard lights, unblinking, watching him. Every now and then it let out that strange little noise, not a bark, not a whine, but something in between. A sound that reminded him of the vet's words. "It mimics a puppy." The phrase echoed like a drumbeat in his skull. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. How could that be true? He had held it in his hands, felt its fragile heartbeat, soothed its cries. No matter what the vet said, Shadow was his puppy. His. He had saved it when no one else would, yet the doubt gnawed at him. The teeth, those sharp, fully formed fangs, the unnatural way it stared, unblinking as though it understood more than it should, the way its cries sometimes sounded eerily like something else trying to break free. His heart ached with the conflict. Love battled fear, and for the first time, fear was winning. He pulled into his driveway, killed the engine, and sat in silence. Shadow pressed against the mesh of the carrier, its tiny claws scraping softly, almost impatiently. "You're not a wolf," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're mine." "Just mine." Inside the house, he opened the carrier. Shadow hopped out with surprising agility, trotting across the floor before curling onto the rug. The man sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Images of the vet's face, serious, uneasy, almost frightened, flashed before him. Not a domestic puppy. Something rare, something dangerous. He looked up and saw Shadow staring at him again, eyes gleaming in the dim light. The creature tilted its head, ears twitching as though reading the turmoil in his mind. And then it did something that shattered his defenses. It stumbled toward him, clumsy on its little legs, and pressed its head against his knee. A soft, almost human sigh escaped its throat. The man's chest tightened. Tears stung his eyes as he reached down, scooping it into his arms. Shadow nestled against his chest, warm and fragile. In that moment, all doubts crumbled beneath the weight of his love. "I don't care what you are," he murmured. "You needed me, and I won't let you go. Not ever." Still, as he held it, unease lingered in the back of his mind. He could not erase the vet's warning. He could not unhear the words. "It looks like something trying to be a puppy." That night, lying awake in the dark, he felt Shadow's tiny body curled beside him, its breaths shallow but steady. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those teeth, those eyes, that unnatural stillness. His heart told him he had saved an innocent life. His mind whispered he had brought something into his home that he did not understand. And for the first time since the day he found it, he wondered, not if he had saved Shadow, but if Shadow might one day need saving from himself. The phone rang the next morning, shrill and insistent against the quiet hum of the house. The man rubbed his tired eyes. He had barely slept, restless from the thoughts gnawing at him. Shadow was curled at the foot of his bed, its body rising and falling with shallow, steady breaths. He reached for the phone, pressing it to his ear. "Hello? It's Dr. Harris," came the calm but firm voice of the vet. "I couldn't stop thinking about your case, about the animal you brought in." The man's grip tightened on the phone. His gaze drifted to Shadow, who stirred slightly as if sensing the conversation. "Yes? I need you to listen to me," the vet continued, her tone lower now, almost urgent. "I've reviewed my notes and consulted a colleague. Everything about this creature is abnormal. The teeth, the eyes, the accelerated development. It doesn't match any domestic dog species, and it doesn't even fit cleanly into wild categories." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "This is not an animal that should be kept in a house. Not without caution." The man's chest tightened. "You think it's dangerous?" "I think it's unpredictable," she corrected. "And unpredictability is dangerous in itself. If it is a wolf hybrid, or worse, something we don't fully understand, then when it grows, its instincts could override your bond. It could hurt you. It could hurt others." He looked down at Shadow, who yawned softly, blinking up at him with those enormous, unblinking eyes. How could something so small, so helpless, be dangerous? The idea felt absurd, yet the memory of its sharp teeth and eerie noises lingered. "I can't just abandon it," he whispered. "It would have died if I hadn't found it. Doesn't that mean something?" On the other end of the line, the vet sighed heavily. "I understand compassion, but compassion can blind us. I've seen people take in animals they weren't prepared for, only for tragedy to follow. I don't want that for you." Her words struck deep, but he clenched his jaw. "It's different with Shadow. It trusts me. I can feel it." A silence stretched across the line. Finally, the vet said softly, "Trust doesn't change nature. Be careful, for your sake and for everyone else's." The call ended, leaving the man staring at the phone in his hand. His heart ached with conflict. He wanted to believe she was wrong, that love could tame anything. But even as Shadow crept into his lap, curling against him with a soft sigh, her warning echoed in his ears like a prophecy. And deep inside, a part of him wondered if she might be right. The days that followed felt strangely calm, almost too calm. The man convinced himself that Dr. Harris was exaggerating, that her warnings came from fear rather than truth. Shadow remained by his side, curling up in his lap each night, watching him with those enormous eyes. The bond between them deepened, and for fleeting moments he allowed himself to believe everything was normal. But normal never lasts. It started one evening when the man left his phone on the coffee table. He returned from the kitchen to find Shadow not in its box or on the rug, but perched awkwardly on the couch, pawing at the glowing screen. At first he laughed nervously. Curious little thing, aren't you? But then he froze. Shadow wasn't just batting at the screen. It was swiping, purposefully, up, then across, as though mimicking what it had seen him do countless times. The man's breath caught in his throat. "That's impossible," he whispered. Shadow tilted its head at him, chirping softly, almost smugly, before hopping down to the floor. That was only the beginning. Over the next few days, Shadow's behavior grew stranger. It figured out how to nudge open doors by pressing its body against the handles. It pawed at the latch on its carrier until it clicked open. Once, the man walked into the room to find Shadow perched on the windowsill, gazing out into the woods with an intensity that unsettled him. It wasn't just looking, it was waiting. One night, as a storm rattled the windows, the man awoke to an eerie sound, Shadow mimicking. At first it was a series of chirps, then a low whine. But then, clear as day, came a sound that made his blood run cold. A faint approximation of his own voice. Just one word, garbled but unmistakable. "Stay!" He bolted upright, heart hammering. Shadow crouched at the foot of the bed, eyes gleaming in the dark, its small body trembling with effort. When he whispered its name, it tilted its head, almost as though amused. The next morning, he tried to dismiss it as imagination. Exhaustion, stress, the storm, anything but the truth. But the evidence was undeniable. Shadow wasn't learning like a puppy. It was adapting, observing, mimicking, faster than he could comprehend. The man sat at his kitchen table, staring at the little creature gnawing on a bone he'd bought from the store. His chest tightened with conflicting emotions. It was still small, fragile in its way. It still sought his warmth at night, still pressed close as if needing him. But now, behind its innocent eyes, he saw something else, intelligence. A spark that didn't belong in a simple animal. Dr. Harris's warning echoed in his ears. Compassion can blind us. Shadow paused, lifting its head from the bone. For a moment, their eyes locked, and the man felt a chill run through him. It wasn't just looking at him. It was studying him. That night, unable to sleep, he whispered into the darkness, "What are you?" Shadow shifted beside him, letting out that strange, in-between sound. A noise that wasn't quite a bark, wasn't quite a growl, and somehow felt far too close to an answer. The man lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling. The bond he had once cherished now carried a weight he couldn't ignore. Shadow wasn't just surviving, it was changing, and with every passing day, he feared it was changing into something he might not be able to control. The man stood at the edge of the woods behind his house, Shadow cradled in his arms. The night was quiet, too quiet, broken only by the distant rustle of branches. The weight of the creature pressed against his chest, warm and steady, yet his heart felt heavier than it ever had before. Dr. Harris's voice haunted him. This is not an animal that should be kept in a house. He remembered her warning, her eyes filled with concern, the urgency in her tone. And he remembered the mimicry, the way Shadow had almost spoken in his voice. It wasn't just a puppy anymore. It wasn't even just an animal. It was becoming something else. He looked down at it, his throat tight. Shadow stared back with those immense glassy eyes, unblinking, trusting. It made a soft chirp, tilting its head as if to ask why they were outside in the cold night. The sound cut through him like a blade. "You're not supposed to be mine," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I wanted to save you, but maybe saving you meant letting you go." Shadow wriggled slightly, pressing its small head against his chest in a gesture that had always meant safety, trust, and love. The man's knees buckled, and he sank onto the damp earth, clutching it tightly. Tears blurred his vision as he rocked back and forth, torn between love and fear, between keeping it close and setting it free. His mind played both sides in a cruel loop. If he released it, Shadow might survive, might find its true place in the wild. But it might also die, too young, too small, too fragile. And if he kept it, perhaps it would grow, adapt, and become something beyond his control. A danger not just to him, but to anyone it encountered. The wind rustled through the trees, whispering like a verdict. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against Shadow's soft fur. "You're part of me now," he murmured. "I can't lose you. Not like this." With trembling hands, he pulled the creature closer, making his choice. He would keep it. No matter the warnings, no matter the risk, he couldn't abandon the bond they shared. Shadow needed him, and perhaps, though he would never admit it aloud, he needed Shadow even more. Rising to his feet, he turned back toward the glow of his house. The woods loomed behind him, dark and endless, but he walked away from them, carrying the little creature in his arms. The final decision had been made. Love had won over fear, but as Shadow nestled against him, letting out that strange, almost human sigh, the man couldn't escape one lingering thought. Sometimes, the choices made from love are the ones that lead us straight into the unknown. The days that followed his decision were heavy with both relief and uncertainty. Shadow remained in his care, more attached than ever, curling against him at night and following his every step during the day. The man tried to focus on the simple things, the way its tiny paws padded softly across the wooden floor, the warmth of its body pressed into his lap, the curious sounds it made when it thought he wasn't listening. Yet beneath those tender moments, a question lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. What exactly had he brought into his life? Dr. Harris called once more, urging him to reconsider. "It's not too late," she warned. "You can bring it here and we'll find a safe place for it." But his answer was firm, though spoken softly. "No, Shadow is mine. Whatever happens, I'll face it." There was no anger in his voice, only conviction. He had chosen love over fear, loyalty over uncertainty. To him, Shadow was not a mistake, it was a gift. A fragile, strange, perhaps even dangerous gift, but one that had filled a hollow space in his life he hadn't realized was so deep. One quiet evening, he sat on the porch with Shadow nestled in his arms. The sky blazed with the colors of sunset, streaks of orange and purple fading into night. He rocked gently, lost in thought as Shadow stared out at the horizon, its wide eyes reflecting the dying light. "You've changed me," he whispered. "I don't know what you are, but maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is that you're here." Shadow chirped softly, curling closer, and for the first time in weeks the man felt peace. Whatever the future held, whether joy, danger, or heartbreak, he knew he had made his choice. And he would not regret it. Deep down, he understood the truth. Sometimes the things we choose to love don't fit neatly into the categories the world gives us. Sometimes they frighten us, challenge us, or even defy reason. But love is rarely about reason. It is about the leap, the willingness to embrace the unknown simply because our hearts demand it. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, the man smiled faintly. Shadow had been left to die, abandoned and alone, and he had been given the chance to save it. Perhaps in some way it had saved him too. He whispered into the night, words carried by the cool wind. "No matter what happens, you'll always be mine." Shadow's strange, almost human sigh drifted through the air as if it understood. And with that, the story of a man and his not-quite puppy became more than a rescue. It became a lesson, a reminder that sometimes the things we stumble upon unexpectedly can change us forever.